All right. Well, thanks for the intro, Sarah. Like she said, I'm Adam. I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is June 26, 2018. I have a sponsor. I have a home group. I have a sponsee. Just one at the moment. Looking for more, though, if anybody wants to holler at me afterwards. Um, Go to meetings. I keep in contact with my higher power. I'm not here by my own doing. I'm only sitting here because I followed the instructions of people that knew better than I did. Because my own thinking got me into some shit repeatedly. Um, so I'm gonna set myself a little timer here because I like to run my mouth and I'll talk for the next 2 hours if I don't. Um, my childhood was pretty hectic, like from the jump. My parents got divorced when I was little because my dad was embezzling money from my grandparents and knocking up secretaries. So I got a pretty sweet little sister out of the deal, but it was very, very hectic from the jump. I was moving back and forth between parents' houses. I always felt different. I grew up going to a private school where everybody had money and I was only there because my grandparents could afford to pay for it. And so I just felt less than for as long as I can remember. I felt different, that I didn't fit in, that, I was always comparing my insides to everybody else's outsides. And definitely didn't realize it at a young age. But it just always made me feel like an outcast. And, I kept pretty straight and narrow through high school. Like I didn't really drink. I didn't do any drugs. I had like a couple drinks here and there before I turned 18. And then I graduated school with honors, like excellent student, did good on my ACT, all that bullshit. And I went to University of Tennessee. It was like the first or the second night I was there, I got drunk for the first time and I was off to the races. I wasn't one of those people who started drinking or using and kind of stuck my toes in the water. Like I was full force diving in. And I got high the second night I was there, and that was my daily routine, like instantly. Um, my first semester at school, I went from being a and B student in college with basically a full ride to having a 0.0 GPA my first semester, failed every class. Not because I couldn't do it, just because I wouldn't show up. I like getting drunk and high and chasing girls more. Um, and so, I came back from school that first semester. I'm like, all right, we're going to reset, refocus. I told on myself to my parents for, drinking and smoking weed. And, thought I was going to do something different. I go back to school the next semester and I did it again, another 0.0. And I repeated that process 3 more times, failed out 5 semesters in a row because I just wouldn't show up to class. I've learned in hindsight, that's the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and expecting different results. But I didn't quite see it then. So, I finally gave up on the school thing, decided apparently this is not for me. I'm just going to go be a server, move back in with my dad. My mom had already kicked me out of her house at that point because I wouldn't quit getting high. Couldn't pass any drug tests. And that's when stuff really started to go downhill quick for me. I just turned 21. I'm going to work with no purpose in my life. I have no goals, no aspirations. All these things that I'd wanted to do when I graduated high school are just gone. Haven't touched any hard drugs yet, and I'm already a shell of myself. And so, I start going to the bar, and it just escalated, the whole thing. Other substances started entering the mix. Lots of white powder. And it was off to the races with that too. Anytime I switched to a new substance, it'd be like, there's a day or two where it's like, okay, I'll just do this every now and again. Or like I would lie to myself and tell myself that I was going to use responsibly, whatever the fuck that means. or I was only going to do it on the weekends or only when I was really hungover. Um, and every time I drew that new line in the sand, I found myself crossing it, crossing it quick too. I'd set whatever boundary it was that I wasn't going to do, and a week later, I was on to the next one. Um, and so it was like my whole life. It was like that movie Groundhog Day, where you're just reliving the same day over and over. I'd wake up, get what I needed to get me through the day, whatever my drug of choice was at the time. I cycled through most of them. And then I would go to work to get more money so that I could get more when I got off work, so that I'd have enough to get me fucked up enough to go to sleep and save a little bit for the morning so I could get some more and go back to work to get some money to do it again. And it's just this cycle that was nonstop. And it lasted like that for, I don't know, from the time I was 21 till I was 25 when I got sober. And I thought that that was all that life had to offer me. Even with my hectic childhood and growing up feeling like an outcast, I got a saint of a mother who always told me, I could do anything, be anything. And I believed that before I started using, but I got to this point where I just had no hope. Um, I couldn't see my life getting any better. Um, Somewhere in there I started taking opiates too, and that's really what brought me all the way to my knees. Um, I just remember having this thought, sitting there thinking like, this is it. Like, this is the trajectory of my life. I'm just going to be a bartender. I was dating this girl, living with her, and she was going to be a hairdresser, and that was going to be peak Adam. We maxed out there because I couldn't save any money. I spent everything I got and then some. It got to the point where I to couldn't afford to buy what I needed to buy to not get sick. Um, and so, I got sticky fingers. It's real easy to reach into grandma's purse and swipe her debit card. She's old. She didn't know she had the money. Um, Obviously those aren't excuses, but that's the rationale that I used at the time. Um, and my life was just falling apart. I stayed in that cycle, like I said, for like 3 or 4 years. Um, and it just kept getting worse and kept getting worse. And it got to the point where, like, if I didn't have something in my system every 4 to 6 hours, I would start to go into withdrawals. Um, and it's fucking impossible to live a normal life like that. Like, absolutely fucking impossible. Because the only thing you can think about is what I got to do to get more so that I don't get sick. It wasn't even about getting high anymore. It had stopped working a long time ago. I'd up the dose as much as I could. Couldn't afford anymore. Couldn't afford to steal anymore. And so I was stuck at the I don't know, that crossroads of like, fucking being sober doesn't work. Fucking getting high is not working anymore. Like, I gotta have something else. And thankfully I got a huge blessing of getting caught stealing from my grandmother. My dad caught on to what was going on. And fucking, it was a major buzzkill at the time, but in hindsight it saved my life. Because my parents confronted me about what was going on, and I still have no idea to this day why, but I was honest with them for the first time in a really long time. um, I guess the only explanation is that I'd finally fucking had enough. um, I always heard people say that you do the first step out in the streets. I'd had enough pain. I knew that my life was fucking unmanageable. My car was getting repoed. I'd been kicked out of my mom's house, my dad's house, my grandparents' house. My girlfriend had just kicked me out of the house that I was living in with her. Um, Parents told me if I didn't fucking go to treatment that they were going to press charges. And it would have been felony charges I was looking at. Thankfully, it was my parents, and I got honest and didn't go to treatment. So I didn't have that hanging over me. But um, As soon as I got honest with my family, God started making things happen in my life. Um, and I didn't see it at the time, but so I told my parents, told them everything, told them what I was using, how much I'd been using, got brutally honest with them. It's really fucking uncomfortable. Um, and then, my parents started calling around trying to find a place to get me into treatment. Turns out I had no idea because I was so fucking loaded the last 4 years of it. But my stepsister worked for the local anti-drug coalition and had a whole Rolodex of contacts, people who help people get into treatment and stuff. And so her friend called a treatment center, tried to get me in Texas, and they had a bed available. But it turns out my insurance wouldn't cover it. Well, here's God working. They scholarshiped the whole thing. It was $52,000 for that treatment center. It didn't cost me a dime. They booked my plane ticket to get down there. It didn't cost me anything. And I was there. I was in Texas from Tennessee within like 12 hours of finding out they had a bed for me. Um, as soon as I got honest, God started working. So I did the normal like 30 days or 28 days inpatient treatment, and it wasn't really heavily 12-step focused. Like there was meetings that you could go to, and I went to some meetings. There's a lot of like behavioral therapy type stuff. But when I got out, I moved back in with my parents, and I had some friends that I'd worked with that I knew were in recovery, but I never really talked about it before. And, I had somebody reach out and say, hey, you should come to our young people's AA group. And so I decided I'd go to it. And I had this big stigma against AA at first because my drug of choice was not alcohol. Alcohol was involved every step of the way. Alcohol is what I started with, but alcohol is not what got me into treatment. And so I kind of had this thing like, AA is just a bunch of fucking old people who smoke cigarettes and drink coffee and bitch about how they wish they could drink. That was so far from the truth. But I go to this meeting, and it was the first time in a long time that I felt welcome. I instantly had people coming up to me, greeting me, letting me know that they were glad I was here. Somebody gave me a big book. And especially in treatment, like I'd kind of got it in my head because a lot of people in treatment fucking didn't want to be there, or, weren't there for the right reasons, which shit, I don't know that I was when I first got there, but whatever. But a lot of people were miserable. And so I kind of expected that sobriety was just going to be this miserable thing. And I go into this meeting, and there's all these people my age, younger, a little older, smiling, laughing, cutting up, hanging out. They were drinking coffee and smoking a lot of cigarettes. I had that part right. But they weren't fucking miserable. And so it attracted me to it. I wanted to come back. And so, I sat down and I started listening. Like I said, when I started, I didn't do anything fucking special to get the continuous sobriety that I have. All I did was take some suggestions. I got told to get a sponsor, and so I got a sponsor, and we sat down and read through that book and worked through the steps from the freaking prefix or what preface to the first edition all the way through the end, and even some of the stories. I started trying to make some sort of spiritual connection. That was a big hurdle for me getting over when I got into the rooms, because I was raised very religiously. One granddad was a deacon in the Baptist church. The other was a preacher in the Methodist church. And so I had some religious trauma, and I had I don't know, there's a big old stumbling block in front of me towards any sort of spirituality or connection with a higher power. I felt like I'd seen what God had to offer, and I didn't want no part of it. But I saw that it was working for other people. And, I'd had enough pain when I was out there to have enough willingness to just fucking try anything. I knew for sure that I did not want to go back to how I was living before. And so I did what my sponsor said. I started praying, and at first my prayers were real simple. And still a lot of times they're real simple. Lots of times I'll pull prayers from the book and, just do a third step prayer, serenity prayer. because sometimes that's what I got, you know. And especially when I was just starting, sometimes all I had was just God help me, because I didn't know what the fuck else to say. But I still think it's one of the most powerful prayers that you can pray. Um, and you know, as I started getting through the steps, I had somebody ask me to sponsor them. So I talked to my sponsor about it. He's like, "Well, shit, as long as you stay ahead of them, you'll be good." And so I did. I stayed ahead of where they were at, and we kept working through it. And as long as I was a chapter or two ahead of them, I could explain what was explained to me. Um, and you know, through doing that, through coming in the rooms and taking simple suggestions, my life has gotten exponentially better than it was when I was out there. Um, you know, the only job I was ever able to keep was serving or a bartending gig. It was a fucking miracle that I kept that job, because I should have been fired 10 times over. You know, I'm able to hold a job today. I've been with the same company for a while now, and they moved me down here to Mississippi. Paid for me to move, which is fucking crazy if they knew all the shit that I've done before. You know, I have relationships with my family again. Um, that's one of the big ones for me. You know, me and my little brother were always real close. And when I went to treatment and he found out, you know, I told him about all the shit I'd been doing and lying to him about that destroyed our relationship. But I got a relationship with my little brother again. You know, he's one of my best friends now. Um, I'm able to be trusted. You know, when I tell somebody that I'm going to do something, I'm going to show up and do it. It's not to say that I'm perfect, because I still fuck shit up. My character defects run wild sometimes. Um, but working through the 12 steps with a sponsor and, you know, the AA program has absolutely changed my life 110%. Um, it, it freaking blows me away sometimes when I look back at, um, where I was before to where I am now. Not to like just fucking pat myself on the back here. I'm not trying to do that, but um, what this program and what my higher power has done for me is absolutely astonishing. Um, there was my timer a minute ago, so I guess I'll wrap it up. But thanks for inviting me to share, Christina. I appreciate it.